Well, ahoy to you, crypto pirates. Welcome to Chatting with the Captain. I am the Captain RG3. Oh, beat down Hexagon. I am tired today. We had my producer, Bullish, has some family issues, so our best out to Bullish. Hope everything works out for him. He'll be back probably later on next week or something. But yeah, he's out for the day. So everything's all discombobulated. No thumbnails. Thank goodness our guests are better than us, and they can put thumbnails together and put them out there. So I got one out for the Twitters. Welcome everybody. Appreciate you coming. Look, we had a little announcement tonight, and price is already popping up. Look at that. Melv Tony showing us at 8.7. Maybe we'll crack that 9 again and keep moving up. So without any more wasted time, I'm going to bring up our guest tonight, OG Hexagon, and real smart guy. I mean, this guy knows his stuff. I've seen him in the Telegram rooms. I know he's working on other projects out there, something we get to talk about tonight. And we don't usually talk about a lot of other projects, but because of the DeFi Live Tour, we're going to be doing that. There are some good Hexagon projects that are out there being built on Pulse that are already actually built and ready to go, just waiting for Pulse to launch. 2 more weeks, folks. 2 more weeks. All right, let's bring them up. Hexagon, OG Hexagon, WaLLrus. What's up, buddy? How you doing?
What's going on, man?
Not much. Just it's been a long weekend. It's only Monday, but yeah, it's been tough around here. We've lost our producer. We've got family stuff going on here too. So yeah, it's been tough, but the show must go on.
100%.
How you been, man?
Man, there's been a lot going on, obviously, right? So we're trying to keep track of the contagion, the new contagion, right? We can't talk about old contagion, but I guess we can talk about new contagion. So it's pretty wild to see everything going on with these banks and how much overlap we have. And then also just quickly, we love Bullish, man. So hopefully everything's good there, man. We'll keep them in our wishes.
Yeah. So the banking thing, let's tap on that a little bit. And then I want to get into some of your history. I always say this, there's nothing new under the sun. And, we saw what happened in the mortgage industry in 2008. I lived through it. I almost lost my house. I lost everything else. I lost my business. It was financial ruin for me when that happened in 2008. Luckily, we got to keep the house. But what happened was, in the name of deregulation, in the name of giving to those who need, they deregulated things. And of course, people put their hands in the cookie jar, and they do that long enough. And we end up defaulting on things, and banks defaulted. But the sad thing about what happened in 2008, just to kind of contrast it with what's going on today, was that so they were predatory on people who were less fortunate, who wanted houses. Now, a lot of them probably over leveraged themselves and made mistakes. But hey, when you've never had anything and somebody was offering you something, it was, hey, jump on it. I can be a homeowner now, but they didn't tell them that, hey, well, this interest rate here is really going to fuck you later on down the road, because we're going to call it an adjustable rate. We're going to start you out at like 3, 4, 5%. And then boom, it's going to start shooting up. And that's what happened back then. And what the banks did was they took these bad loans and they took good loans and they put them together in packages and sold them as good loans. They said, hey, there's a bunch of good loans here. And then of course it infected the whole thing. And before you know it, the whole thing ended up crashing because people couldn't pay those mortgage payments when you were already stretched out paying a $2,500 to $3,000 mortgage payment, and the thing goes up to $4,500. You're done. It's like a margin call on you, and people lost their homes. And the sick thing about the whole thing is that the banks took those homes back. So they sold the house in the first place. They loaned out the money to these folks. They took the homes back, got the properties. And then as everything was crumbling down, they had the taxpayers bail them out of the situation. So they had the first loans, insured. They took that money. They took the homes, the properties themselves, and then they took the taxpayers' monies on top of it, and they made out hand over fist, and nobody said anything about it.
Capitalism on the way up, socialism on the way down.
Exactly. And there, I hear them screaming socialism about, the people in the streets who, the working class folks and everything, but they didn't talk about the socialism that was going on in the banking industry with all the very wealthy people that were taking the money out, and they were stealing a lot more money than a welfare mom or a guy cheating on his unemployment or anything like that. There was a lot of money going out the door when these banks did what they did, and nobody said anything about it. And here we are again, crisis number 2, just a few years later.
It's like you said, nothing new under the sun. I think maybe the only thing different now is the culture might even be weaker about how they're going to handle it. There was still some level of conservatism and ownership, personal sovereignty, responsibility that even that's been wiped out. So I'd be amazed if there's even pushback. I mean, half the people in the States probably don't even realize anything happened yet.
No, they don't. Well, let's start from the beginning. This was about deregulation once again. The little banks needed help. The little banks needed to act like big banks, even though they can't. They're not supposed to. They shouldn't. But let's deregulate them and let them act like big banks. So maybe they only can get a hold of 50 billion, but we're going to let them get a hold of 250 billion like the big banks. And that was just a recipe for disaster. Mm-hmm. And here we are,
And if you look, Gregory Becker, the CEO of Silvergate, mm-hmm. he was actually trying to petition months and weeks before that, trying to get them to loosen the regulations around that $50 billion limit. He was trying to push the limits there, trying to take it because there's more restraints and more regulation that come around if you actually hit the 50 billion threshold. He was trying to actually push that for months and weeks before. And then Moody was going to declassify their debt and knock it down. So again, this is one of those where, like everything, it's one on the way up, you'll never think you'll be down again. And when you're down, you'll never think you'll be up again. The same sort of sentiment we see in markets. We see that same sentiment individually with people. And you have every single flag in the world. And then all of a sudden the fastest, biggest bank run in history. And everybody's shocked afterwards.
Yeah. It's like, you're shocked. Really? You saw it coming down the pipe. I mean, the thing that gets me is, and I haven't looked deep enough into what Mr. Thiel did, but he had something to do with this SVB downfall, because it wasn't a bank run in the sense that we know bank runs like It's a Wonderful Life bank run where everybody wants to go and get their $100 out of the bank. It wasn't like that. It was the investor class that pulled out of the banks. And then once the investor class pulled out of the banks, it created a rug pull, which then created another bank run. So that then all the people, all of the entities that had money in there wanted to pull it out too. And that's when, the margin call came and they had to shut the doors. But Peter Thiel's organization is one of them that pulled out. Now, I don't know if they did that to bring awareness to what was going on. I don't know if they did that to cause this or whatever, but they were involved. And that's interesting. That's something that I want to do some research on. I don't know if you've heard anything about it or have any comment on that.
Not directly on Thiel's side, but I think it's one of like the most underrated quotes in movies. And this is actually a great financial quote. It's from a Batman movie when Bane and those guys run into the stock market and the guy says, "What are you doing? There's no money to steal here." And he says, "Then why are you here?" And like, it's so funny how that idea of these guys going in bank robbing, like you said, there's not A Wonderful Life $100 bill anymore. They're not here to steal paper. They're here to steal digits. So you can look at these things in these bank runs. I mean, it's a digital bank run. These things happen so fast now. And I think even in bank run, we lose scope of these things being the same. From when you kind of look at the precipice, the beginning of that thing hit, it was averaging billions an hour in withdrawals. Billions an hour. You're talking about like money, like billions wasn't even a thing like a decade ago. How many times did you hear billions said like 10 years ago? And now I'm telling you that there are billions moving out of a small bank every hour. Like there's never been a bank run that is even in the same order of magnitude as what we just saw with SVB. but we've become so numb that we're like, oh, it's a bank run. Yep, happens.
Yeah, bank run. Yeah.
No, it doesn't, guys. No, that does not happen. You don't see $40+ billion move. You don't see 40% gap closures where you're just moving this amount of money on stocks. Like, no, this doesn't happen. Banks don't just close, and then you don't see another one close, and then another one close. No, that does not happen. We've gotten it's one of those things we're getting so comfortable with the language. Like this is a rare event.
Yeah, it's like it's arterial. It's an artery being ripped open. It wasn't just a bank run.
And it's just like, the same. It's fractional reserves. I mean, like this is what it is, right? Sometimes we get really quickly on the moral side, but there's also just the fundamental side of like, this is what you get from reserve banking. Reserve banking is really capital efficient at some point. It allows you to really push leverage and different spreads. A lot of these instruments actually function really well in fractional reserve right until they don't. And then they explode. Like and that's what you have, right? So I think even with fractional reserves, if we really get into it, if you're like, hey, what's the best methodology? It still probably is some variation of fractional reserve, but it's 80%, not 0.18 confidence percent.
And that's the problem is we try and let up on some of the regulations or some of the actions like reserve banking, and they get loosened up a little more. And human nature is always, one of the things everybody asks me, like, RG, what do you want out of life? A little bit more. That's it. That's the answer, because that's human nature. We all want a little bit more. And it's those people that continuously keep taking it more and more and more until, like you said, it just implodes, because you've loosened things up so much that it has nowhere to go but implode. This fractional reserve banking, I've only just recently, a few years ago, discovered what it was when, I sat down and somebody was telling me about banking, and I said, yeah. You loan your money you give your money to the bank and they loan it. No. That's not how it works. That's not what fractional reserve banking is. Fractional reserve banking is that your money that's in the bank is literally a liability to the bank. It's their liability. And they borrow against that like tenfold. Not like just borrow what they have in there and say, okay, well, we're going to hold this, but we're going to borrow against it, and that'll keep us somewhat solvent. No, they do it 10 times over, and it's just,
and it's on top of the other guy's leverage, which is on top of the other guy's leverage, which is on top of the other guy's leverage, which is only backed up by the Fed, who printed the first amount of money in the first place.
Exactly. And it's just, it's a recipe for disaster. I don't know what the solution is. I'm mortified at the whole situation, that this fractional reserve banking is the best that the world has to offer. Like, really, I mean, this is the best the world has to offer right now. This is our financial situation on the globe, and it's starting to implode. Now, crypto has an answer for it. However, we're such a small little speck of nothing in the world of finance. I find it funny when I listen to a lot of the Bitcoin rooms in the on the Twitter
the Twitter sphere.
This Twitter sphere, the Twitter talks, and these guys are so adamant about how Bitcoin is going to save everything and fix everything and and I agree that crypto and even Bitcoin, if that was all we had, would be a better solution. However, adoption is something else. Getting everybody to roll into it is something else. The space doesn't have a good name when it comes to global recognition. Everybody's heard of it, but most everybody thinks it's a scam. Just like in the crypto sphere, the Hex community is considered the scam, and we're such a small part of the crypto community. But we've got the product that actually is true DeFi, is the best that crypto has to offer. But I think it's going to be a long time and a hard fought battle before something like, our space, crypto, actually fixes the situation out there. I'm sure they're going to try and do some kind of, CBDC freaking reset that's going to try and fix the whole thing. But that's, I don't know. I don't know what their plan is. I'm still trying to figure it out, but it's not looking good.
There's a term that I've actually found like really interesting as I look through things. I'm always looking for like a new lens, new perspective, trying to like just filter through information. And it's kind of funny. It's the word perverted. And we almost always use it talking about like in a sexual context, but like perverted is just doesn't have that connotation. We just use it that way. And I find that there's a lot of things that start out as such a cool idea and they get better and better and better. And then somebody breaks it. And now it's like a perverted wreck. And I think we see this with all kinds of stuff. There's all kinds of things where we can look back and we're like, man, in my day, sometimes it's a reference to something personal, but there's these like peaks I think we see in things before they get ruined. So, it starts off with like fractional reserve. It's like, hey, if we're not 1-to-1 back, there's not this big, this huge pile of dormant capital. We could be way more efficient. You're like, okay, that's a good idea. And then all of a sudden you spiral out to SVB collapse 2008. And you're like, hey, I don't think this was a good idea anymore. And like, that's the perversion, right? And then you start with crypto and it's like, hey, peer-to-peer digital cash. This is a cool thing. I'm all in. And then it just gets pushed and you're like, all right, how about mutant bride zombies and CBDCs? And you're like, okay, hold on. This isn't a good idea anymore. And what's funny is I think we see this in a lot of things that we don't even think about. You can see where there's almost like a lot of beauty on the way up and into perfection. So like you look at like 60s and 70s muscle cars. Okay, well, like those things, they're shit cars. They suck, right? Like they're carbureted. They're all heavy. They're using bias ply tires. This is the most beautiful things anyone's ever seen on the face of the earth, right? Is these 60s and 70s machines. And then where you can kind of see is like now everything's just the same teardrop bubble. They're just different symbols stuck on the front of cars. And that's where there's like this almost like an S curve to, I think, beauty in some of these ideas where it'll start out, maybe it's functional, maybe it has to break a plateau, maybe it's a disruptor for other tech. And then it gets better and better and better. And then somebody breaks it.
Yeah. Yeah. I've seen it over and over and over in lots of different industries. And I'm trying to wrap my head around what the answer is going to be, because, we look at banking today and like you said, have you ever seen that old movie, It's a Wonderful Life?
Oh yeah.
Okay. So like literally the doofy banker brother, cousin, whatever, brother-in-law puts the bank cash in an envelope and loses it, and that's what brings the bank down. They had the funds, it got lost. It wasn't like they were doing this, manipulating the numbers and the money was there. That's how the bank operated back then. Like it had the money. They lost the money accidentally. It wasn't really a shenanigan shell game or anything like that.
For the younger members in the audience, what he's saying is that banks used to have money in them. Old tech, crazy stuff.
And then this old movie, the guy was supposed to take the money and deposit it, and he loses the money, the envelope, at the rich guy's place that where the actual money belonged to, who, and so then the whole movie is about this bank being in big trouble, and this guy, just basically wanting to kill himself because it was, the end of the world for him because of his little bank was going down. But they didn't have bank runs back then because they had the money in the bank to,
Yeah, it was an act. You had to physically run to the bank and then run away.
Yeah, you had to run to the bank and run out of there and get in a line and ask for the money. And literally the banker in the movie was pulling money out of his pocket to give to the people in his town because of, small town, small bank and all that stuff. But that's how banks operated back then. And now this is in the 30s, 40s or 40s, 50s. And, is set back then. And now today it's like, they don't think twice about, owing 100x more than what they've leveraged, and they're just going to go, no, we need to be bailed out. Government, forget the people and their anger and all that stuff. We need to talk about the government. Did we just go 9-1? Melf Tony just said we went 9-1.
Let's go.
Let's go, Hex. Let's go, baby. Yeah. Yeah, we are. Nice big green candle printing on the daily right now. Wow. Look at that.
And what's funny is when we're talking about this bank run, in a lot of ways, like SVB just got a real good taste of almost like what we see with flash loans. Like this stuff already happens in crypto, and where when you look at how these things work, sometimes when we say the word friction, we almost forget how we use it in an economic sense. So again, like what we're talking about is if you're talking about an old bank, how many clients actually like move the needle for them? Okay, if it's average people, how many people would have to physically walk in the door to do a bank run at that point? I mean, it's almost impossible, right? Like you have to get to like Great Depression style events for there to be real bank runs. They just don't happen. And then you get to a point where you're like, okay, a lot of this is digital. There's communication. This stuff happens faster. And you can see that throughout some of the 70s with hyperinflation. And then it happens even faster. And you can see 2008. And then we've gotten to the point now where you can see it's not fast. It's instant. 24 hours can move tens of billions of dollars and wreck a bank in the gap between when the bell rang and when the bell rang. Like this is like, and these things, when they get faster, when they remove friction, they move faster. And that means you have to play the game tighter now. And they haven't adjusted. It's the same thing that happened in 2008. And we see this in crypto. If you take the same methodology that works in legacy, crypto's too volatile. It moves too fast. And it's the same thing that we're seeing in the banking industry now. More efficient is good and bad. It depends on what side of that efficiency curve you're on.
We just got some really good news. I hate to interrupt that,
no,
but
please.
Richard just tweeted, that was 42 minutes ago. When Pulse Chain, you must have saw this then, testnet v3 launches, that will also count as your warning that mainnet could launch anytime. I really would love to see everyone enjoying their free coins as soon as possible. Fingers crossed. That's a hell of a tweet right there. That is a bullish ass tweet right there.
And that's something that I want to walk back just quickly. I brought it before that I actually had the assumption that there would be another testnet, but not like a testnet version 4, but hey, we're about ready for mainnet. You put up a testnet that actually runs in parallel, a long-term testnet. But Brett confirmed that a while back in that tweet there that this is it. This is the testnet that they'll continue to run even after mainnet.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I was a little slow, guys, because I have a show to do. I had to go away from the Twitter for a few minutes to go get ready, freaking take a shower and spike the hair and, the whole thing. So yeah, I'm a little bit late, but anyway,
he doesn't have a producer, guys. It's a one-man band.
No producers. I'm trying to get the thing going here for y'all. Bring in the alpha here. Bring in the alpha. But look, we're at 9.3 already. It is soaring right now. We're moving fast. We are moving fast. I got to pull up Dex
real quick
now. I just real quickly pulled up oh boy, where's my Dex screener at? So I just pulled up Staker real quick just to see, and it's already at 9.3. Oh, I got it in there.
Crypto surfer. Let me know when you read that comment, Captain.
Boomer gets his tweets from the bird at his window. Yeah, well, you go to timeout there, fuckface. So let's see here. Watch list. There we go. Yeah, man, we're at 9.3. We're moving. This is really interesting what's happening right now. Pamp it, baby. Yeah.
Let's go.
So what do you see? So I know crypto's going to pump. We're going to see some funds come into crypto because of the banking issue. As it gets worse and worse, funds are going to want to move. I'm sure that there are people out there wanting to jump into crypto. I'm sure there's sideline money coming in. What do you think is going to happen?
So I think that we are underplaying what you just said a second ago when we're like, I'm sure there's money coming into crypto. And you meant it with the connotation that like there's issues with banking, people are untrusting, right? That's been our narrative since the beginning, but that's never really been true yet. Like,
yeah, now there's a reason.
What's been bad for the market has been bad for crypto, right? Like we've RH to this. Hey, this is a leverage play on the S&P 500. Like we've still moved lock and step, obviously with a ton more volatility, all kinds of micro events, but generally the curves are generally the same, right?
Yeah.
This is extremely bad market news that has given us the inflection of positivity. There's a sign of maturity in that. we've not had this before. It seems so logical to be like, oh, well, if you're not happy with legacy, if you're worried about banking, why wouldn't you be in Bitcoin? Well, that's been true since 2009, but we haven't seen that sort of inverse
There's never been a
correlation.
reason. It's that dog. There's a dog crying on the porch, right? And it's like, why is that dog laying there crying on the porch? Well, it's got a nail in its ass because it's laying on a nail. Why doesn't it get it up? Well, he's not ready to get up yet. You know what I mean? And it's like everybody's known this was going on. They've known that there was other solutions. They've known that, you know, that's what Bitcoin was here for, and crypto was here for that. But they've never had a reason to. And now the pain is getting more severe. And there's a ton of money on the sidelines.
And we've seen it. Like I think if you look over this whole bull, I think there's been this whole bear, there's been so much to be bullish about. So FTX explodes. People didn't leave crypto. I mean, crypto took a hit, don't get me wrong, but it didn't wreck it. It wasn't the beginning of a cycle.
It was already wrecked before, and it didn't even move the needle. That's one of the things I was very, very surprised about. Was that you remember 17? Whenever there was news, if there was news in 17, boom, it was dipping. And any little bit of news, China, you know, farted on the freaking miners, and you know, boom, it was bam, there was problems. FTX comes out, I'm going, oh shit, here we go, nothing. Didn't even move the needle, didn't even blip, you know. And of course, we've continued to rock down or whatever after the FTX thing. But look at what did it do right after that? It started rising.
Bitcoin got moved off exchanges. People took on sovereignty, and that, again, that's not happened historically. When we've seen issues, it was just, oh well, I guess we'll just wait for the next exchange and give those guys another shot. We've seen that move. When we saw sanctions come toward Russia, Russia pivoted. And Sabur and their banking started taking up more of these assets. Again, this is a negative example. Why does North Korea use crypto and Tornado Cash? Because it works. And because you sanction them, they had to go use better tools. So obviously that's not my favorite use case, but that shows this stuff functions. Otherwise, a nation state wouldn't be using it the way they were. And so we're seeing more and more of this correlation where when you push us, we go, you know, central exchanges broke, we got pushed to DeFi. When you see these things keep getting pushed, you sanction us, we move to DeFi. Now when banks break, we move to DeFi.
Some joker just sold $500,000 worth of hex.
I'm going to assume that guy doesn't have a bird in his window telling him what RH's tweets are.
Oof. Someone just sold $1.1 million worth of hex. Somebody's got to look at that. Look at that address. Somebody look at that address. Let's take a look if it looks familiar. OXF 9666666. That's not.
No, 666 is a famous address, isn't it?
Yeah, but it's not this one. This one's 666 too, but it's OFX 9666. The other one is a different.
Yeah,
I do believe. I wonder what. Let's see how much this guy's got in there. Overview from. Wow.
I would love to see if the people in the chat want to find out. How did that guy actually execute that order? I'm wondering if somebody who did that also just swapped it in MetaMask, had terrible order execution. It just had to be, right? Like there's no way that guy's using a DEX aggregator on CowSwap and having.
No, that was a market sell right there, just a straight up. Poof. It looks like you sold $500,000 and ended up losing like, I don't know, it looked like about 30,000. $30,000 fee. Oh my goodness. People.
What is it? Life's hard. It's not that hard.
It's not that hard. It isn't. I mean, my goodness. I don't know if that hit an order or not. I can't really tell. But who knows? Womp womp womp.
Yeah, that stuff kills me. I actually like. How did you find Hex and not find out enough to not do that? You know what I mean? Like, how did you get in the community? You just hear everywhere. You go in the Twitter spaces, you might hear the stupidest stuff being said. But as soon as you ask a real question, even in the space, like they'll hop on and be like, what are you doing? Why would you do that? Like you could literally go to anywhere you hear Hex discussed, people talk about slippage, order execution, DeFi, wallets. Like this stuff gets
Yep.
preached. I don't understand how you can even find the community and still be doing stuff that dumb.
There's just we have an immaturity in this space that is beyond compare. They don't understand money. They don't understand it. You know, they've played this stupid crypto game for so long that they think this is how you do it. I mean,
Yep.
old tried and true techniques of investing should be implemented in this space. If they were, we'd be in a lot better position. But we don't have that. You know, we've had this, PT Barnum atmosphere here where all of these exchanges and all these shit coins, all 9,999 of them have, just reaped havoc on everyone, and the degen trading and the shell games that they played.
Mhm.
It's become part of the culture, and it's how people have learned how to treat this space, and it's pathetic. And what is you? It's perverted.
Yep.
It's perverted, and this space needs a washing. It really does. It really does. We need more intelligent people.
We can do a lot of that ourselves. Like everyone keeps like almost like waiting for the other shoe to drop on a lot of this stuff. Some of the regulation, like that could just be internal standards. Like there can just be like that's ERC20 is a token standard. Like so we have like regulation always seems like it's from a third party. We can self-regulate so many things in crypto that make a ton of sense and are not that difficult. FTX, like there's some of these conversations. One of them is that decentralization is a spectrum. I know what people mean, but I usually hate that conversation. It's one of the dumbest things. The other is like when we talk about central exchanges, there's this like, okay, we use it to on and off ramp. That's what they're this. And it's like, okay, well, there was not like that is not what FTX was. FTX blew up for a lot of reasons. And it wasn't because they had billions of dollars that were in transit.
It was horrible management. It was horrible management. Is what it was. Yep. I've never seen more amateurish, immature leadership in my life in anything than this crypto space. The thought leaders that we have are they are the worst managers. They are the worst leaders that I have ever seen. It's just this space really needs some maturity. It really needs some good people to come in and start doing the right thing. And I think that the Hexicans are the beginnings of that. I think that the best of the best saw what Richard built and gravitated to it and said, this is how crypto should be acting, looking, feeling, being. And you think about it. You look at all of our community. Our community is full of the smartest people in crypto. They're just the best. You and Axis and Silver and all the others out there that are just out there just spitting alpha about how the crypto space should really look and how it should really function and act. I mean, I built this channel to draw people like you into this space, to showcase it and to show that we have maturity, that we have real intelligent people that can go out and manage these things and build these things in crypto versus all the crap that's out there, all the other influencers out there that are shilling, leverage trading and all this other bull crap. That's what I built this channel for, was to showcase people like that. And I think that we have that in Hex. I think that the Hexican community is the best that crypto has to offer. And like you said, we are the beginning of that. We can actually build on this, continue to, I mean, the truth engine makes us all, on the up and up. First of all, Hex is Hex. You have no choice but to have good behaviors because of how Hex is. If you want to invest and you want to do well, you have to do the right things. Of course, we're going to have people like what we just saw do some stupid crap like this. And I mean, look, the price is already back up. You know what I mean? It's already at 9.3 again.
The trend is your friend, homie.
And that guy is probably going to get, left behind now. He like you said earlier, why did he do that? There's other ways to do this. There's limit orders. You could have, like did you need all $1.5 million of that right now? Could you have DCA'd or limited yourself out of the market too, and been a good custodian? We've talked about that here on the show for a long time, as being good custodians, especially the OGs that have monster bags. You have to be a good custodian of the system. That's what Elon Musk doesn't pull all of his money out of, SpaceX. And, you don't see Amazon stocks just getting sold off by Bezos. People are good custodians of their products, and of their communities. But for some reason, crypto, man.
I've been bringing this up a little bit lately. Part of this is because I have a weird fascination with, this is the weirdest thing. I've absolutely love the data and game theory behind dating apps. For anyone who hasn't, I absolutely encourage anyone to go look at the math behind Tinder and things like that. People have no idea the economics and how those things affect the world. It's insanity. I'll get on a tangent another time. But with crypto, I think that in some ways, and it's part of the reason that, again, like the ethos in this community is so strong, is there's issues in the culture that crypto solves as well, beyond just the financial side. We don't trust anything. We don't trust the news. We don't trust any of these institutions. We don't trust the banks. We don't trust any of them. And there's almost a conversation that almost can be tweaked. We talk about trustless systems. They're also trusted systems. Like, they're trustless, and that they don't require trust, which means you can trust them blindly, essentially, right? And
Yes.
so I think so many of us in the culture are looking for something to put our back against. But you can't trust the banks. We don't trust the dollar. We don't trust it. We don't trust any of these things. You can trust the code, though. And I think there's even just there's a cultural effect that has, and ownership. So, like you said, you have to be a good custodian. So you're responsible to the community. You're responsible for your bags, because they're your bags. You own them, and other people own the same thing. And you can trust the code. You can trust they're going to be there again. And that is not very common in the world right now. And I think that those things also are part of what draw so many odd personality types that have so much commonality. I mean, if you go grab the top, I don't know, just 20 hex people off anyone's head, they have nothing in common, but they have a ton in common, because there's a handful of core ideals that end up driving so much of what these things do. RH hates sports. I love sports. I do football and all kinds of stuff, right? Like, we've got absolute just, guys like Axis, who are over here just, looking like that Always Sunny in Philadelphia meme, just drawing all over the charts, doing math that I have no idea what he's even talking about. Those guys are brilliant going over those.
Yeah.
And then you've got the funding gyms who are business guys who are like, no, they're smart guys. I bet on them. Makes sense. And then they make a mint. You just this huge spectrum of people that agree on a handful of things. And it's a lot of this stuff is cultural, I think, and it's important.
Yeah. Something interesting that you said, that like my whole life is when it comes to interacting with other human beings and business and family and lifestyle, the whole thing is trust. Trust is like that one thing. And trust is mathematical. And, in order to trust something, somebody, a thing, a code, anything, you have to risk giving up a little bit. You have to throw that out there and say, I'm going to trust this, and there has to be something that there's got to be a risk there involved in the trust. It can't be just, perfection. Hence the OA. That one thing that you have to trust, that you have to put your trust in and know that it's going to be doing the right thing for you. And that's what we did in the beginning when the adoption amplifier came out. That was the one thing that was like the big FUD. That was the one thing that we all were questioning. That was in the beginning, we even questioned it. Myself, Hexo, we all questioned, the OA, hey, and even in the back rooms, like sometimes we wouldn't say it in public. Man, you think that, you think it's going to be good, or man, he's got that, come on. We know Richard's probably the one that's in control of it, even though he says he might not be, oh geez, and, but you know what? We trusted it. We watched the run. We watched the adoption amplifier launch, and everything worked fine. And then we started to see into the psyche of Richard and what he was saying, what he was doing, and his personality, the way he was acting about the OA. And then when we saw the OA move to protect the stakers and to protect the system, it was like, boom, the trust was like reciprocated. Like we knew what it was. It was all along what we were trusting it to be. Even though we may have had some doubt, the trust we put in it made us all very, very wealthy, very, very, satisfied with what it had done. So the trust was reciprocated because of that. So I think that, having code, of course, almost perfect is a much better system than this banking system that we have today, and that's the message that I want to get out there when I go on the road and start doing the DeFi live tour. I want to start talking to everybody about that trustlessness, about how much better that is, than the old system where we were depending upon people in the background. We were depending upon old systems that were being manipulated. And bigger money, bigger power interests than any of us little people would ever, be able to understand or be part of, putting our trust in those things, and, but we have for so long. Look what they've done to us,
And that is, I think, a great takeaway from what we just saw with this banking issue. How many people had ever heard of Silvergate before this?
Yeah.
How many people have heard of Silicon Valley Bank before this?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, a guy named Gregory Becker that you've never heard, from a bank that you've never heard, had funds held for Circle, who then couldn't reestablish their peg because of the fact that Silvergate and the Sen Foundation had been closed a couple weeks before that. And that's what caused the scene to get wrecked. The level of abstraction and the amount of players involved in keeping that thing whole are people you have never heard of. So maybe, again, there's certain risks, things that we can see in crypto, but that's because they're transparent and you can actually see them. This thing, no one knew that. No one knew who Gregory Becker was, Greg Becker, whatever that guy's name is. Yeah, no one ever heard of that guy 3 weeks ago. No one ever heard his name. No one ever heard of Silicon Valley. But some bank you've never heard of and a person you never heard of came in here and just damaged the system. When I say the system, I'm talking about USDC and Circles.
Yeah. That was a mess too. It almost seemed like that was a setup. Like that was, I mean, people behind the scenes knew what they were doing when they pulled that whole thing. But
there's an old quote that I was like, it's not what you don't know, it's what you do know that ain't. And
what you do know that ain't.
What you do know that ain't. So like you brought up some of those clowns over at FTX. I think did you ever get a chance? Did you actually look at the picture was circulating for a while, their corporate structure?
Yes.
That ain't dumb people.
I mean
that.
I laugh. I mean, I'm like billions and billions and billions of dollars were put in the hands of that system. Like they were doing when the investigators went in to go check it out, like 60-something-year-old investigator comes out and goes, they're using QuickBooks and some of this shit. They had stuff wrote down on pieces of paper and QuickBooks they were using to manage this shit. It was laughable, the whole thing, and I mean, that's what happens when too much is given to people that just aren't ready for it. They just weren't ready for that. I honestly don't think that now I'm not saying that there wasn't some actors behind the scenes that knew what was going on and that were siphoning off money off of this thing and knew what these kids were screwing this thing up.
I'll say it then.
But I don't think that they knew exactly what they were doing. That it was more of them being inept than actually them trying to screw everybody.
I think that they were aware, and that 100% the sentiment that you're bringing up, but I think that there are highly educated players throughout that structure in different ways that knew what was up, that were propping it up for a long time.
Well, they're the ones that are getting away with the shit. Mm-hmm. They're the ones that aren't going to get held to account. They're gonna drag this freaking frizzy headed kid through the fucking mud,
and
and
that's why I brought up that structure. So there's so I used to, this is something I used to do this a lot. It actually started with football. I used to watch how people would walk out of the huddle because I played corner. So I wanted to know, is this a pass or a run? That was the very first thing. So I just got used to like, all right, what tells me something is something, right? Like these odd tells. So when you look at certain things, this used to happen when it came to like pre-qualifying people in sales. They'd be like, hey, you don't know who's poor, you don't know who's rich. So if somebody's not wearing expensive clothes, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're poor. But if they have a Rolex, okay, I mean, again, there's some wiggle room, but essentially there's some money there, right? And so that to me is what that corporate structure is. That type of corporate structure not only is impossibly difficult for almost the entire world to actually set up, but that would take a team, and I'm not exaggerating, a team of some of the best people in the world at accounting and money management to actually make that structure function in a way that the structure was still beneficial. And it ain't QuickBooks, and it ain't a couple of guys with some a couple of meth patches and a bad attitude. So I think that's your like, okay, that's what I know, or that's what I don't know, or that's what I know that ain't right. That does not add up. And so I think that's what we can see with some of the stuff with Silicon Valley. I think it's the same level where I don't think this is full on puppet master strings. I think that you have an opportunity that you don't want to go to waste, and that people can start to see when they see the stressors and cracks and are like, okay, this is probably a sinking ship. How do I make money? How do I break this thing in a positive way? And I think I think that the same way was FTX, we saw both these things at play.
Yep, I agree. I think that's what was going on because there were more mature actors or more intelligent actors in there that saw the fissures and the cracks going on, and they were like, "Well, how do I capitalize on this before this whole thing sinks?" You know, and what's really sad is that this kid that they propped up as being some genius. I remember the newspaper, the magazine articles were like propping this kid up like he was some kind of brilliant genius, and that whole thing was just suspect to me, man. I was like, wait a minute, this kid doesn't talk like he's that intelligent. He, the interviews I saw, the things that I saw, he was a little quirky. You could tell he was a basement dweller, and he was a smart kid, but he didn't have any maturity in his angles and things that he said. He just was. The whole thing was suspect to me. I was like, man, how is this? And then they were trying to play him off as this guy that drove around in a Toyota Camry, and he was just giving his money away all over the place. And in all actuality, he was in the background. They were just waiting for him to be the scapegoat on this whole thing as it crashed to the ground. And the kid's going to do a lot of time. He's probably going to die in prison. We saw what happened to Bernie Madoff. Bernie Madoff died in prison, and he didn't even do his little thing looked like child's play compared to what this thing did. I mean, this kid's going to get raked across the coals. And they're going to do the same thing like what they did to Ross. I mean, Ross got busted for the Silk Road thing, and now he's doing life in prison. He got stung and whatnot, and this space is just the worst of the worst are getting it.
We have the same problem with Alexei from Tornado Cash. I read the brief in the comments from I'm 90% sure it's Dutch prosecutor. Stupidest thing I've ever heard. That he based the basic sentiment from them, and they have, I think, another like 180 days rolling over before his next chance to get out. They basically said that there's no difference between Alexei, the code, and the company.
Whoa.
That's pretty much their argument is, well, these guys did stuff with your code, and your code is from the company, and you're part of it. Like it's ridiculous. It would never hold up in any industry anywhere. Like it's just, they just don't like it, and they're just basically these charges
trying to make an example out of it
and look for a problem. Yeah, it's insanity. How again any of the thresholds? So There's a few extra. I don't know what they are over there where he's actually being charged. But in the U.S., there's certain if you build something for exclusively nefarious use, there's externalities and a few different ways that these things can be charged. They just happen very rarely, but they're for scenarios like this. But none of those would hold water for Tornado Cash. Like, it was used for a long time effectively. There's a million uses. Lots of people have used it for very proper and rationale reasons. And the idea that this thing was just some nefarious tool that Alexi's a dweeb. He's a nerd. Like, he writes good code. And I mean that with love, right? Like, I'm saying this affectionately. Like, the idea that he's tied in with some North Korean hacker unit out here just trying to pump the rockets up and get these things fueled for Kim is like, what are we talking about? Crazy.
Yeah. Again, they're looking for scapegoats, and it's sad because these young men that are getting raked over the coals were they were smart guys that got into this space and started building things, and the bad actors came in and messed with the things that they've got, just like all the exchanges. It was necessary. Mt. Gox was necessary in order for us to finally find value in Bitcoin. It was necessary. We needed a place to exchange dollars for Bitcoin, and that's what it was there for. And then, of course, nothing new under the sun. Somebody found a way that, oh man, hey, let's go in and rip people off. This is too much money flowing through here, and then the same thing, Ross wanted to, make a free marketplace. And then, of course, what happened? Hey, let's turn this thing into murder for hire and, drugs being sold door to door and everything else, and then he got sucked into it too. And the same as Tornado Cash. He didn't, I'm sure he didn't mean to, well, let's see how I can help the third world countries launder money into their war machines and blah, blah, blah. No, we need privacy in this space. We have a problem with privacy. I can't pay my people in crypto because they get to see who I'm paying, everything else I'm buying, all my wallet. They get to see everything. It's like I have to drop my drawers every time I send somebody some crypto. We need things like this,
And people are unused to it. You don't want your people seeing how much money you have. You don't want them seeing what other people are being paid. You don't want your employees knowing who your suppliers are. You don't want your suppliers knowing who the other suppliers are. I mean, when it comes to a
or how much you're paying your employees.
Exactly. 100%. People, again, it's one of those things that most people don't see, kind of like, again, economies at scale, and they just think about how they operate. Like, again, another like crazy rabbit hole that people want to understand, like some privacy. Go look at corporate espionage. It is some of the most nuts stuff you'll ever see in your life.
Oh yeah.
To see how much value goes in, how dedicated some of this personnel is. I mean, they're basically private 3-letter agencies out here running this stuff to try to get a heads up on Samsung, try to get a heads up on Apple, and move around this IT.
There's corporate hitmen out there. You can go. I forget the guy's name. He wrote a book about it. He was a corporate hitman. He would go out and he did jobs for corporations to go out and and destroy other companies or make a hit on the company that he was involved in. Or I mean, it's a game. It's a freaking nutshell game.
Yeah, it's a wild one, man. Yeah, but the idea that privacy is even this nefarious idea, like that's a malicious idea to have that connotation. That one, it's fun just to be like, hey, none of your damn business. Like, there should be a lot of just value in that statement alone, let alone the connotations for where it can be, price positive or negative, depending on how you look at those things. And the other part is just, it comes down to, I brought this up before. Most people, when they talk about privacy, are either talking about one from just a moral standpoint, none of your damn business, or what it really comes down to is asset protection. And so that's where I think we've sort of missed the mark on some of the communication in crypto. If we said, hey, there needs to be layers of privacy for asset protection, for commerce, rather than just, I understand where the ethos comes from, but we do a bad job in who we're speaking to. When we say, I brought this up before about saying, hey, like the code's unstoppable, like then you take away regulators' options, right? So if you come to, again, a regulator, someone outside of crypto, and you say, hey, I want to be able to instantaneously, privately, anonymously move around funds all across the world. That sounds terrifying to them, right? Like they don't understand economics. That sounds scary. If you say, hey man, you don't want me to see your bank account, do you? They say no. And you're okay. Well, you don't want, you have private when you business. You don't want all the people you work with to know how much you make, right? Yep. And if you just explain, it's like, great. So we agree on the same thing, but this thing has to be transparent in certain ways. So now we have to have this level of privacy here to function. It doesn't mean any of these other things that can go on. These things are still there. There's ways to still have regulation and control in those that don't come from this crazy perspective. And it's the same thing with, I think, regulations now. I think we have the same problem. If some regulator steps in and says, hey, we want to have a handle on something, and our answer is, go F yourself. It's crypto. It's unstoppable. We're PFPs. It's unedited. It's like the guy goes, oh, okay, ban. You just told the dude there's no options. You told him it's this unstoppable, anonymized force. And regardless of any positive or negative, like you told them there were no options. When the answer was, hey, please don't break what we have. This thing functions at a great level. This occurs in tons of industries. There's Swift. There's over-the-top communications. There are industry after industry where there's a branch that basically stays unsegregated, uncensored, and then you figure out how you want stuff handled in your jurisdiction.
And they can still do the research. They've been doing the research on cash all of this time too. They know where cash moves and how it goes to these third world countries that are trying to do nefarious things and whatnot. They've got a handle on. They can do the same thing here. They can watch the flows, the outflows and the inflows, and kind of gauge and see what things are going. They're using this as a scapegoat to come after crypto, I think.
100%.
Or to figure out how to get a handle on it so they can get their hands on it versus allowing the people to have it, which, that's the libertarian side of me says this belongs to the people. It belongs to the people. You can regulate it because and that's the other part of me. That's the capitalist freaking, Marine. I think my country is still great and could be still great if the people would come together and fix it. Side of me says, I'm okay with some regulation. I'm okay with some taxes. I'm not an anti-taxer. I'm not an anti-government. I'm not a zombie apocalypse kind of guy, but somewhere in the middle, there's got to be an answer. We need sovereignty with our money. We need to get it out of the hands that it's in because they've screwed it up. And it's not the government. People keep saying, oh, it's the government. Well, the government is a bunch of people that have a lot of money that have manipulated it. They've taken our government away from us. The people with the money have taken it away from us. And they've used social issues to try and divide all of us so that we can't come together and go after them. Because there's a lot more of us than there are of them. And in a democracy, they lose. And see, they got to turn this thing into where it's not a democracy anymore, where it's an us versus them, a red versus blue, this race over that race, this over that they have to create that in order to keep us from coming together and kicking their asses out, because, we'll never get anywhere until we do try and figure out a way to get back into that and into our government.
And I brought this up now recently, like if you're like, what's going on with the culture? Like like people naturally jump to, like you said, red versus blue, or like a trans issue, or like some of this stuff where it's just absolute, just, it's so tense. You come.
None of that stuff ever mattered before. Look, there's been trans people around for fucking 50,000 years.
No one cared.
And nobody has ever cared about it, and now all of a sudden it's an issue. They're screaming about it. It's like when I was a kid, I was a kid. My grandparents took me to Vegas and I saw the Kenny Kerr show, and people here don't understand what that was. But in the 70s, there was a guy named Kenny Kerr and he had this all male burlesque show. Guess what? Maybe it did mess me up a little. It didn't mess me up. It didn't mess me up.
Rocky Horror Picture Show.
Yeah, Rocky Horror Picture Show, all that stuff. Nobody cared about it. It was like, I'm not trans. The trans guy's cool, whatever. He's cute, whatever. Hey, more power to him. He dances good. He sings great. Cool. Right on, buddy.
We see it now. Like they put out this stuff and they're like, oh, it's because whatever phobic. Man, your stuff sucks. Like people like the show Community, they had the dean on that show is, you know, all this kind of craziness, right? Like he dresses up and does all this fun stuff. No one cared because the character was fantastic. You watch Schitt's Creek and you know, David on there, he's one of the funniest characters ever. He's an effeminate and bi, or again, how we identify. It's fantastic, man. Like, so you just look at across the board, most people never really cared. They just thought stuff was either good or it wasn't. And now that stuff's being hijacked. And you set up for just a second before we jumped on. You brought up like DC, and I think we've just gotten so far away from reality. People forget why DC was even created. Like I'm sure you probably realize, man. Like, does everyone realize why DC is not a state? It's because it was never meant to be a state. By definition, by purpose, because if you were a representative of Texas or Delaware or New Hampshire or California, you weren't supposed to live in DC around all the rest of these lobbyists. You were supposed to go there, represent your constituents, and then take your ass back to your state. Go back to work, go back to farming, go back to building something. You weren't supposed to just sit in a cesspool with the rest of those people. That was never the idea. And if people just go through some of these exercises, you know, even corporations used to be almost exclusively state chartered for a specific purpose, and then they would get disbanded all the time. Even the idea of the word corporation is completely different than its origination. And I'm not saying, again, I'm a capitalist, I make money. Like this isn't I'm trying to tear it all down and go back to just wearing a leaf. Like it's just there's some levels of reality where these things started before, again, they were perverted and destroyed. And we're just arguing about nonsense when you just had to take a couple of steps back. And so much of this stuff is cleaner and easier to process than they make it out to be.
Yeah. I was looking at the chats going off.
Yep.
we threw some trigger issues out there.
Chaos.
Yeah. I mean, DC, I went out there recently to go see the lobby shops down on K Street. And I've tried to tell everybody here kind of how our government really works versus I hear a lot of they, them, the government. And, you know, you said about, you know, corporations were like regulated. Like we used to like, hey, you operate under the auspices of the state. You don't have any rights. You know, you can do commerce and business as long as you're within the law and this and that. And then it flopped. And I don't know if you remember a politician by the name of Mitt Romney. He was very famous for saying corporations are people, my friends. And that's when things changed. And it wasn't because he said that, it's because he knew that because of Citizens United. Because of Citizens United, they had all of their money was their voice. And those of us who just had a voice, we didn't have the same kind of credibility that they had. We didn't have the same equity that they had. And that's what we've been losing all this time. The corporations have taken over versus where they were regulated and handled before. Like you said, they used to disband them. They'd shut them down. You know, now try and shut down a company, try and silence one, try and, you know, stop it from affecting your legislation in your state. You know, they have control now. And it's because of Citizens United that has allowed all of this money to flow into our politics. So when I went down to DC to kind of like see all of this thing in operation, and there's a street called K Street, and that's where all the lobby shops are. And it's bar, restaurant. And then up on top, there's meeting rooms, and that's what they do. You know, everybody leaves for lunch. Boom, they're out there in the lobby shops. And the politicians are looking for money, and the lobbyists are looking for politicians that will sign their legislation into law. And they literally write the legislation at the lobby shops. Our congressmen and women, our senators, they don't write the laws. The laws are wrote in the lobby shops and handed to our senators and our congressmen, and they're told to pass this. If you don't pass this, I know you live in a very Republican state or you live in a very Democratic area, but if you don't get this passed, then we're not going to, we're not going to, try and bring the other party in against you. No, we're going to bring someone from the same party, and we're going to get your ass out of there. And that's what they do. And so, yes, boss, let me take this legislation back and get it signed for you. And they go in and they get the legislation signed. And that's why all the tax laws are wrote to support these corporations. That's why, all the mom and pop shops have to pay their taxes and whatnot. But a big box store comes into your town. Guess what? They're not going to have to pay taxes because they're the big box store and they're going to bring business. And what they do is they really bring, the quality and the level of pay and everything else down it's just been one thing after another, all these little things. And then you've got the prison industrial complex. You've got the oil companies. You've got the medical companies. You've got the military industrial complex. I mean, all of these things are just crushing the poor middle class guys like me who worked his ass off for, close to 40 years of his life and doesn't have a pot to piss in because they've taken all of the meat off of the bone. And when it's time for me to end, my days, there's nothing left.
So remember earlier I brought up how I thought like the dating app Tinder, that game theory and math behind that stuff was so interesting. It has nothing to do with the actual swipe. It has to do with some of this distribution. And I think it's very, very similar to what we're getting at here, where nature doesn't have isotopes, right? Like that's the reason like pharmaceutical companies are looking for an isotope and they're hoping it's a drug that does one thing. They want one chemical, one action. That's just not how stuff works. And it's the same thing with economics. Okay, tax the rich, add a tax for rich people. Rich people then adjust and don't pay it, right? Like we want these things to all work in these nice, clean boxes, and that's not how stuff shapes up. And that's one of the things that I think is so interesting about the mathematics on those is whenever you remove some of these barriers, you end up with the weirdest results. So when you look at Tinder, it actually causes all these crazy issues. And it's the same way with this consolidation of power. So over 85% of the swipes for males come from the top 5%. 85% come from 5%. So it ends up destroying the middle, where now if you look, there's a bunch of other really cool social stuff that goes on, but it's the same thing that we see in the scale. If you look at the culture, what's average? Average is 6 foot making six figures. What? Wait, like you're talking about like 40 dudes in the country. Like that stuff is so warped. The same way that we look around and we say, oh, there's a billion here, a million there. Like there's so much jading from scale. And so when you look at the distribution on this stuff, it's insanity. And it causes some of the craziest feedback loops that people would never think of. And you can look at the amount of like involuntary celibacy and a lot of math that actually comes out of these things that get exacerbated. But what I'm really getting at too is whenever there's this lack of restrictions at the top, they just destroy the middle. And when that power consolidates, it ends up being such a perversion and a net negative for the whole. If people just don't care about other people and make sound choices, like it is insane how affected the rest of the population is from those things. I mean, it literally comes from everywhere from the complex you just listed, literally down to something is almost funny, especially for older guys, or if you're married or have fiancés, this is almost hysterical to be like, hey, Tinder is actually really messing with the mathematics in the world. It's 100% true.
Interesting. Well, my friend, dude, oh shoot, I still got Melf Tony's number up there. Hold on, let me take that down real quick. It's been awesome. We've gone over an hour, and if Bullish was here, he would have already shut us down. I can't even find the tweet, but anyway, I appreciate you coming on. I got to have you again, man. This was a great conversation. We got more to talk about, I'm sure. Hold on, hang out in the green room for a minute. I'm going to go ahead and shut it down. Everybody, thanks for coming. We will catch up with you The next time on Chatting with the Captain, Wednesday's going to be me and Famous going to throw it down again. What's going to happen, baby? What is going to happen? We are at 9-4 again. Hex is taking off. I'm excited. You should be excited. V3 coming soon. We'll catch all of you guys on the next one.